Hey everyone. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to play Clash on Baker Street. Clash on Baker Street is a social deduction game similar to Mafia and Werewolf, and here's how it works. So there are two teams. There are the sleuths, who are the good team, and you have the villains, who are the bad team. And kind of the lore of the game is based loosely on the Sherlock Holmes lore, so the good team of sleuths is headed by Sherlock Holmes, and the evil team of villains is headed by Moriarty. And depending on how many players you play with, Sherlock and Moriarty are both characters in the game. There are roles you can have in the game. So here's how it works. Based on the number of players you have, a certain set of roles will be in the game. You can see what these roles are in the rulebook. So I have a 5-player game set up right now, and I can see that the roles are there are one villain, one Hurett, one Sherlock, and 2 sleuths for a total of 5 players. So there are 3 players on the good team, and there's 2 players on the evil team. And you can play with up to 10 players. So if you play with 10 players, I believe it's 6 players on the good team, 4 players on the evil team, and then there are different roles that individuals can have within those 2 teams. So I'll talk a little bit about that towards the end of the video. The game consists of 5 cases, and each case can either be solved or botched. The sleuths want the majority of cases to be solved, and the villains want the majority of cases to be botched. Okay? So the game is about deciding who will try to solve those cases and then seeing whether the cases end up solved or botched and trying to sway those numbers in your favor. So that's the high-level overview of the game. Let's get to the first case so that we can see how exactly a case works. So let us... All right. So in this game, I am Sherlock. Sherlock does something special in the game, which I will explain in a second. So once you're ready to start the game, you click your ready. And we will first start the game in a night phase, which is just a phase where we get to see some private information. So as Sherlock, the special power of Sherlock is Sherlock gets to know who the 2 villains are in this particular 5-player game, right? So just as a reminder, there are 5 players in the game. 2 of them are villains, and as Sherlock, I already know who the 2 villains are. They are Bot 2 and Bot 4. That's why their names are in red. Now, you might ask yourself, if I already know who the 2 evil players are, why can't I just say that and exclude them from whatever is happening in the game? I'll explain that at the end. Okay, so let's first go through how a case works. So if you look at these 5 numbers at the bottom, these numbers tell us how many players attempt to solve each case. So we need 2 players for the first case, we need 3 players for the second case, 2 for the third, 3 for the fourth, and 3 for the fifth. And when the case tells us we need 2 players, what happens is, if it's your turn, you will propose 2 players, and then the group will vote on whether they want those 2 players to attempt to solve the case. Okay? So let me give you an example here. So this is a 2-player case. So I'm going to say I want to attempt to solve this case. And I'm also going to bring along Bot 3. So this is the team. Bot 3 and Ankit is the team of 2 players who are going to try and solve the case. And now everyone gets to vote on it. All right. So everyone gets to vote yes or no for whether they want this proposed team to go and try to solve this case. So I'm going to say accept. But we see 2 people said accept, but 3 people said reject. And so the proposal is rejected. So Bot 3 and I will not be solving this case. And now my turn is over. And now it's Bot 1's turn to propose a 2-player group that will try to solve this case. So you'll notice Bot 1 proposed Bot 1 and Bot 2. I will accept it. Great. And now 4 people have accepted it. And so this proposal will happen. So now Bot 2 and Bot 1 are going to go on this case. And it says the case was solved. So let's explain what happens when people go on a case. So let's imagine that Bot 1 and I, that was the proposal, and everyone, the majority of people said yes, and so the proposal was accepted, and now Bot 1 and I are attempting to solve this case. Each person on the case will get 2 options. One option says solve, and one option says botch. And you will essentially choose one of these options secretly, and that goes into the case. So if you want to think of it like you have two cards and you are choosing one card to place face down into the case. So everyone will do this. They will either play a solve or a botch card, if you want to think of it that way. And then those cards are shuffled and flipped. And if there are any botch cards in that set of cards, the case is botched. But if they are all solve cards, then the case is solved. Okay? So essentially, if even one person places a botch card, the case is botched. Now, there's a couple of rules around what cards you can place. If you are on the sleuths team, if you are a good player, you have to solve the case. You have to play a solve card. Even if Ludio lets you click the button that says botch, it will still play a solve card for you. If you're a villain, you have a choice of which card to play. You can either play the solve card or the botch card. And if you play a botch card, then you know that the case will be botched when it gets flipped over and there's a botch card in there. Of course, nobody knows who put the botch card in there except you. So this is the entire point of the game, which is that when a case is botched, you know that if you were not part of the proposal, from the outside, you know that one of the players on the proposal put in the botch card, but you don't know whom. And that's where the social deduction comes in, because one person will say, I think Ankit did it. And then I will say, no, I know for a fact that Bot1 did it because I am a sleuth, right? And Bot1 will claim the same thing. And then we have an argument and then people make up their minds. All right. So that is how a case works. There are 5 cases in the game. A case happens when the majority of the group accepts the proposal. And then those players go on the case. They solve it or botch it. And then the entire case is solved or botched. All right. So, to recap, the sleuths want at least 3 of the 5 cases to be solved. The villains want at least 3 of the 5 cases to be botched. Now, you'll notice just based on the numbers, for example, the last case requires 3 players to go on it. And out of the 5 of us, 3 of us are sleuths. So the only way to guarantee that this case is solved is to put the 3 good players on that case. And that is what the entire game is about, is trying to figure out who those 3 good players are and building consensus around that. And of course, the villains are going to be trying to throw a wrench in that plan and convince other people that, no, I'm one of the good players. You absolutely need me on that case. Now, let's talk about the special roles. So I'm Sherlock in this particular game, and I know who the 2 villains are. There's an additional part of the game once the cases are done. So let's imagine that 3 of the 5 cases were solved. Normally, the sleuths would just win. But because Sherlock is in the game, there's one final part of the game, which is if 3 of the 5 cases are solved, the game ends. The 2 villains are publicly revealed to the entire group, and they have a minute, I believe, to decide who Sherlock is. If they can successfully guess who Sherlock is, they will shoot a player, hoping it's Sherlock, and if they shoot Sherlock, the villains still win. Right? So Sherlock is this special role that has information about who some of the villains are. But Sherlock cannot just come out and say it and then tell everybody, okay, let's never put bot 2 and bot 4 on a case. Because if Sherlock does that, then at the end of the game, the villains will just shoot Sherlock, who they know for sure is Sherlock, and win the game outright anyway. Right? So Sherlock has to leak their information in a smart way without being very obvious to the villains that, hey, I'm Sherlock. So that's what Sherlock does in the game. All right. Let me draw your attention to a few other things. So the history, not this history. So this is the game history. This shows you all the actions that are in the game. But this history, which is this special widget specifically for Clash on Baker Street, this history button shows you the history of proposals and cases. So let's just interpret what this means, because this is a useful thing to keep glancing at as you're playing this game, as you're trying to figure out who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. So what this border around the box means is that it was my turn to make the proposal. So Ankit proposed this, Ankit made this proposal, and the 2 people on this proposal were myself and bot 3. That's why we have check boxes in our cells. And bot 4 and I upvoted. We accepted this proposal, and the other 3 people rejected it. That's why their boxes are in red, and my box and bot 4's box are in green. So the thicker border tells you who proposed it, the checkboxes tells you who was on the proposal, and the green or red tells you who upvoted it and who downvoted it. And if the case actually happened, then this check mark tells you, hey, the case was actually solved. It would be a cross if the case was not solved and it was botched instead, right? So this case history is worth looking through because part of the strategy of the game is trying to understand who are people proposing and why. So if I'm a villain, I usually want myself or one of my villain teammates to be on the proposal so that they can go ahead and place that botch card secretly if the case actually comes to fruition. And so you are looking at this table and trying to figure out, well, why did Ankit put bot 2 on it and not bot 4 on it? And why does Ankit consistently do that unless maybe Ankit is a villain and bot 4 isn't, or bot 4 is, and so Ankit doesn't want to be on the same proposal as bot 4 and so on and so forth. So you have to reason not just about who is bad and who is good, but you have to try and deduce that based on how people are voting and what they are proposing. That is the game. Now let me briefly talk about the special roles that show up when you have a higher player count. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pretend we're doing a 10-player game here, which has all the special roles. And I'll just quickly explain what the special roles do, and then you really just have to play with them to experience what a more chaotic game is like with more information and more special roles. Okay, so in a 10-player game, you have Sherlock. Sherlock knows who 3 of the villains are. You'll notice there's 4 villains. So there's Moriarty, there's Irene, there's Hewitt, and there's the Hound of the Baskervilles. So as Sherlock, you will know who the Hound is, you'll know who Hewitt is, you'll know who Irene is, but you won't know who Moriarty is. And between the 3 between the 3 villains you won't know which is which. So you'll just know, hey, these 3 players are villains. All right. Watson is a sleuth. Watson knows who Sherlock and Irene are, but Watson doesn't know who is who. So Watson will be shown 2 players, and Watson will be told, hey, one of these players is Irene and one is Sherlock, but you don't know which is which. Next we have, sleuths are as usual. So sleuths are just good players without any special abilities. On the villain side, we have Moriarty. Moriarty is unknown to Sherlock. You have Irene. Irene is revealed to Watson, but Watson doesn't know Irene is Irene and Sherlock is Sherlock. Watson is confused, right? Watson is in the dark about that. Hewitt, who also showed up in the 5-player version. Hewitt is the player who has to make the final decision about who to shoot if the majority of the cases are solved. So if you get to the end of the game, 3 of the 5 cases have been solved, the villains come out, and Hewitt gets the final decision of, I'm shooting this player because I think that player is Sherlock. That's what Hewitt's role is. And then finally, the Hound is a villain who doesn't know the other villains, and the other villains don't know who the Hound is. So if you're in this 10-player game and you're a villain, let's say you're Irene Adler, you will know 2 of your teammates, Moriarty and Hewitt, but you won't know who the Hound is. But you know the Hound is out there. You know that there's some other player who's also a villain. And that complicates things because you might end up trying to solve a case with someone, and then, you put... in your mind, there are no villains on this case, and so you play a solve card, but then suddenly a botch card comes out of nowhere, and then you're like, I guess the Hound is on this case, but who is it? So all sorts of interesting possibilities with the roles. This is a really fun game with a lot of replay value. We have played it a ton, and once you get good at it, you start reading into the votes, you start reading into the proposals, and we can't get enough of it. So I hope you really enjoy it, and yeah, thanks so much. Let us know how it goes. Take care.